When I was thinking about what I wanted to speak about this week, I thought about gratitude because November traditionally is a month where we do think about gratitude because of Thanksgiving, even though the Thanksgiving mythology is bogus and it's the colonial myth of the United States. I still appreciate the invitation to reflect on gratitude. It's an important practice. I think it's important to cultivate gratitude in our lives. And at the same time, I also was thinking about the shit show that's going on right now in our world. And there's the pandemic that's continuing in various levels in various places. It's continually evolving. There's the pushback against any kind of racial accountability, like CRT or the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, etc. There's this dysfunctional government gridlock, this othering that is commonplace. We just create these enemies constantly, and then so there's that going on outside. There's the emotional shit show that might be happening. There's the grief and mourning from the pandemic, from all the loss of lives, of jobs, of things we're familiar with, all kinds of stuff. Whether it's acknowledged or not, these emotions we're impacted by this. My sister-in-law sent me an email. She emails me every day, just a couple of lines. And yesterday or day before, she said something about it. I don't think we're going to get back to the way it was. And I'm like, no. There's never any going back because it's all an imagination anyway. It's all made up. As soon as it's gone, it's in our minds, and we're creating a story of what was, which is part of the problem that we're in right now. So there's all these experiences that people are having that can sometimes really feel very hopeless. And then there's all our own particular stories, our own lives, and what's going on in them, the joys, the sadness, the sorrow, whatever's happening. So, the question that comes up for me as I was thinking about this is, how do I keep my heart open? How do I keep my heart open in spite of all of this stuff that's going on? I mean, I've spent years talking about living with an undefended heart and making that a lens of my practice. So that I think that's probably why that came up for me. There's a teacher up in the Bay Area in Oakland, Wisham Patricia Ikeda, and she posted on Facebook the other day. She does a daily metta, which is loving kindness. She's been doing that, I think, since I started doing the morning meditation. So it's been like, over 600 days. And so every day she does a metta for somebody. And yesterday or the day before, she did a metta for Representative Gosar. He's the guy who put up that horrible anime. She goes for his graphic person, because obviously I'm sure he didn't do it. He had somebody do it for him. And I commented that that's graduate level work, that really keeping this open-heartedness towards people, not developing our own place of hate and hardness and othering. That's not a place that's healthy. That's not a place that's wise and skillful. And that's not where I want to go. And I don't think we want to go there as human beings. It's so easy to fall into that. But how do we instead keep our hearts open? This is what the practice is about. It's easy to fall into those bubbles. But how do we do that? How do we not fall into bubbles, but instead keep our hearts open? Because if you think about it, hardening our hearts, keeping this anger, doesn't do anything to the others. It has an impact on us. It has a detrimental impact on us, whether we're aware of it or not. And so intellectually, we may understand that, but it's really difficult to do. So that's what I wanna reflect on this evening, is how do we keep our hearts open? How do we not fall into fall into lockstep with everyone else? And so one of the things that I thought about, that somewhere over the last few years, I came across an exercise. I saw an article by Rick Hansen. Rick Hansen, he's a Buddhist teacher, but he's also, I love his title, he's an evolutionary neuropsychologist. So, and he's neuroscientist, neuropsychologist, he says. And he wrote the book Buddha's Brain, but he wrote this piece that's not in Buddha's Brain, but I forget where I saw it. I probably did a Google search. And he talks about letting go. And he talks about when we let go, when we want to let go of thoughts or ideas or habits or whatever that may not be served or may not be beneficial, that we just want to let go of for some reason because they cause suffering for ourselves or for others, they cause harm. He says that when we want to let go, letting go without aversion, without going, I have to do it because I have to do it, but from a genuine acknowledgement of it would be a lot better if I didn't have this, if I didn't hold on to this anger or this habit or whatever it is. He says it's really helpful to join with something wholesome in its stead. So we're not just letting go into a vacuum. We're bringing something else that we can move into. And it's really important because it gives the mind something to work with. So thinking about something you want to let go of, letting go of painful feelings, thoughts, stories, ideas, you want to, how you do this letting go and joining is you get to think about what you want to let go of. And if you're thinking about a story that's painful, what does it feel like in the body? What is that story of, not being enough or that anger you have towards a particular person, whatever it is? See what that feels like in the body. And then as you reflect on what you'd like to have instead, how does that feel? Often the one thing you want to let go of, there's a tightness, there's a constriction. And when you let that go and bring the other thing in, there's a softening. There's a spaciousness that happens. And so there's a visceral experience of the difference between the two. So basically you're retraining your mind, which is not a bad thing. It's what we do when we sit. It's what we do when we practice. We retrain our minds to not get lost in the habits, those grooved patterns that we succumb to subconsciously. Instead, it's this intentional movement towards something that's really beneficial. When I was doing this couple of months ago with this class I facilitate, this Year to Live group, I had them write, and I wrote too. And one of the things I wanted to let go of was busyness, of just always doing something. I mean, I have a lot of things to do, but then I do a lot of things I don't need to do. So, and then when I don't have something to do, I think in my head I have to do something. So I wrote busyness, and then if I let go of busyness, what would I want it to be, and what would I have instead, or what would something wholesome be? And what came up for me was spaciousness and ease, recognition that I could not do something, that I could sit and maybe read a book, or I could go for a hike, or I could call a friend on the phone, or I could do something. And it was like, wow. And so not that it has to happen right away, but when the idea of busyness comes up, let it go, and then instead bring this other intention to mind. And so in fact, I was talking to a friend this week about this, and she said she just can't abide someone she works with. And does she have to replace it with loving thoughts for this person? And I went, because that was like she couldn't get there yet. And instead I said, instead of thinking about the really horrible thoughts you have about this person, she just dislikes them very much. I said, instead, soften to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Bring some softening to you, because having that animosity towards someone can be really painful. So if you can soften that's something wholesome. So that type of thing. So the reason I bring this up is it's really helpful when we're caught in this idea of the world is a shit show and it's going to hell in a handbasket and la-di-da-di-da, whatever. We forget a lot of times, because we're so wrapped up, we forget that there is joy. We forget that there is laughter, even in the midst of grief and pain. There's all this coming and going. Last week I talked about the 8 worldly winds. There's pleasure and there's pain, or there's pain and there's pleasure. There's loss, but there's also gain. These things happen. And when we're so focused on the one, we miss out on the other. And so what would be joyful, what would be wholesome or beneficial to join with? And what came up for me are gratitude and generosity. So I want to talk a little bit about that, the gratitude and the generosity. There's a line in one of the suttas, one of the discourses, and it says, "A person with no integrity is ungrateful and unthankful. This ingratitude is advocated by rude people. A person of integrity is grateful and thankful." And what that reminded me of is the world that we're in right now. Is like we can see this so often with all the behaviors of these people who are entitled, my rights, screw you, all about me. This ingratitude, this lack of integrity, this rudeness. And by integrity, I'm pointing to a main teaching of the Buddha, of the precepts and the Eightfold Path, the ethical portion of the Eightfold Path, to not cause harm, to not intentionally harm ourselves or others. That's kind of what this is pointing to have this ethical foundation that you're not just caught up in yourself, that you do see other people. This it's all about me and mine and blah, blah, blah. It's this colonized American mindset of rugged individualism, which cuts us off from connection and cuts us off from connection with others. And gratitude helps us get out of that separateness, helps us to recognize that we're not just stuck, on two sides, that we are connected with each other. When gratitude is difficult, it's because we're coming from a place of lack. How can we be grateful for this when we don't have that? Instead of just being grateful, there's the yeah, but syndrome. Yeah, but. And this eliminates yeah, but. It's just, no, be with the gratitude. Be with the gratitude. And when we get caught in that, what about this and what about that, we get caught in the negativity trap that feeds on itself. Often we're taught that the grass is greener, which is why, again, it takes effort. It takes intention to let the mind just relax and cultivate this gratitude, really shifting our perspective and how we see things. Gratitude is a very direct way to connect with well-being. We're connecting with something beneficial that we're aware of, that we're connected with in this moment. Not that what we don't have tomorrow or what we didn't have yesterday, but what's present right now. It's because we are paying attention. Gratitude is awareness. We're paying attention to this moment, not yesterday and not tomorrow. So we can see the sunset. We can see the breath that we're breathing in and breathing out, the color of the sky, our ability to think, our ability to walk, or whatever it is we have, the food on our plate, the roof over our head. We recognize this. So to be grateful for that, gratitude opens us up to a larger perspective when we're faced with challenges. And it helps us address them, because when we're faced with challenges, so often we get caught up in that. And gratitude is not a bypass. It's like, well, I have to be grateful for this because. And it's like, no, there's a genuineness to the gratitude I'm talking about, of like, wow, things are really difficult. And this burrito is so good. Or my kitty is the sweetest thing in the world. I'm so grateful for that. Because there's always a yardstick of not being good enough, or needing to do better. And we can acknowledge we need to do better in certain things, and we can acknowledge that we're perhaps not always as skillful as we could be, but we can let go of the judgment and be grateful. It's not either or. It's this and this. This is true and this is true. They're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I used to be so disdainful of gratitude. And in fact, that's what you want to look at. I like to say, if you're struggling with something, like struggling with gratitude or struggling with something else, what's getting in the way? And for me, a lot of times it was dismissiveness. You know, I was just totally dismissive of gratitude. I think I had that yeah, but mentality. You know, I would get caught up in it's not enough, perhaps a sense of perfectionism, or non-deserving, because I'm not good enough. I don't get to have this gratitude. Or we get stuck in fixed views. This is the way it is. And why should I be happy? Because it sucks. And what do I have to be grateful for? Or we get caught in judging or comparing. And so it really is helpful to take a moment and reflect on if you struggle with gratitude, and when do you struggle with gratitude? It's really important. And when you do have a moment that you can connect with gratitude, rest with it. That's why I always do this invitation to be grateful at the end of meditation. 99% of the time I do it because it's so important. Rick Hanson, I think in Buddha's Brain, he talks about how important gratitude is to really changing our neural pathways, to moving us from unwholesome to wholesome, from not beneficial to beneficial. Gratitude has an impact. If we rest with it for 10, 15, 20 seconds, it has an impact. And there's also this thing that I heard years ago, that when you're grateful, you can't grumble. So, and I actually hang out with this sometimes. I go, okay, I'm feeling really grateful right now. And it takes that whininess out of my experience. It's like, oh, I'm really grateful. This is sweet. And I'm grateful for little things, little things. I don't have to postpone my gratitude until the whole world is perfect. And one more thing I'll say is that it really helps with connection. And Thich Nhat Hanh, when he talks about the gratitude we have to recognize, especially like before we have a meal, when we sit and before we eat, to recognize how that food got to us. I mean, farmers harvesting, planting, truckers, processors, shopkeepers, however, you know, restaurant chefs, servers in restaurants or wherever, how big this chain of interdependence is. We're not these rugged individualists who grow all, I mean, maybe you are, but we grow our crops and produce them and eat everything. There's still things we're dependent on for others. And so to see this chain of interconnectedness gets us out of our sense of separation, because that sense of separation is false. It's absolutely false. So gratitude also is a way to get out of that sense of separation. And another way getting out of that sense of separation is why I think about generosity, because generosity and gratitude can go hand in hand. They are both antidotes to clinging, and they keep us in the present moment. And generosity is incredibly important in Buddhist teachings. In fact, oftentimes generosity is taught before anything else in traditional Buddhist countries. People learn the sense of giving and of offering things. And because it is, and as I said, an antidote to clinging. And clinging is a cause of suffering, our wanting things, our keeping things. And so it's incredibly important to learn to not be so attached to things, that we can be willing to share. It helps to, this generosity is a spiritual quality. In fact, it's one of the the paramis, which are spiritual qualities that are necessary before we can become enlightened. And so it's very important. And in fact, Sharon Salzberg, in her book Loving Kindness, where she talks about the heart practices, which are traditionally loving kindness, appreciative joy, compassion, and equanimity, she talks about generosity as well. So generosity is a heart practice. It cultivates our heart. As we learn to give, we get a sense of courage, love, and brightness. That it's this spaciousness that opens up. With giving, there's often compassion, love, joy, letting go of desire, letting go of ill will. And with giving, it's unconditional. Like all the heart practices are unconditional. There's no expectations. Because if you give with an expectation, that's a transaction. That's not an act of generosity. So to recognize that, Sharon Salzberg also said that it's a huge delusion to think that what we do doesn't matter, but giving helps us see this differently. We can take delight in being generous because it's not egotistical. It's, this willingness to share with somebody else. It's such an important practice, and it's not just financial. It's not just monetary generosity. It's generosity of spirit, generosity of time, caring. It's a lot of things. We can be generous in so many ways, so many ways. We live in a world of hungry ghosts. And I love this image. In Buddhist mythology, one of the realms, there's human realms, God realms, animal realms. There's the realm of hungry ghosts. And hungry ghosts are these creatures that have these ginormous bodies and these really small, like little, a straw, really narrow mouth. And they just can't get enough, can't get enough, can't get enough. So a lot of where we operate right now is this realm of hungry ghosts. There's never enough. There's never enough. It's that sense of addiction, and not just, drugs and alcohol, but I was talking to Rick Hansen actually after a thing a number of years ago. And he was talking about like the internet is the realm of hungry ghosts, like social media. There's always, more, 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 more. And so to recognize that, this craving and clinging. So if we can let go of needing one more thing and cultivate this generosity, there's a tremendous amount of freedom there, because there's always something else to want. So if we can let go of that, it's not easy. It's really hard because we think we live in this world of lack, that there's not enough to go around and they're ruining for me. And why should I give them what I have? And I'm going to cut off my own arms and legs rather than support someone who I think is different from me, And so the question is this who we want to be? Is this who we want to be? It's not who I want to be. And again, that sense of generosity cultivates connection, because we are connecting with another person. We're connecting with something else. It's and can be really simple. I've heard a few times, and I've read it, that like from people in supermarkets or servers in restaurants and things that are dealing with the public, that it seems that people who were snotty and annoying before the pandemic have gotten exponentially worse, and people who were kind before the pandemic have gotten exponentially nicer and more polite. It's really this extraordinary thing. So again, we've kind of gone into our separate places. One is beneficial, one's less beneficial. So generosity, incredibly important. And another factor in this practice of generosity is the ability to receive generosity, which can be incredibly difficult for people. Again, especially in this world we live in, this world of rugged individualism, and we pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, which is a fucking myth. No one in this world can do it on their own. No one. Absolutely no one. It's a deadly myth that we really need to continue to chip away with. I saw a program a few years ago about the Depression and the Dust Bowl. And the Dust Bowl, for those who don't know, was this time back in the 30s when a lot of the agricultural lands in the Midwest, there was a number of years of severe drought, and then the land was just over farmed and wasn't very healthy. And so for a number of years in a row, they couldn't grow anything. And there were these winds, and it was just the soil was just dust, and they could see the dust blowing back east in like New York. I mean, it was that bad. And farmers, the government wanted to support farmers, and farmers refused. I remember seeing clips of people refusing, saying, no, we don't accept charity. We'll do it on our own. And it's like, you're dying, your animals are dying, your family is starving to death. But it's this ego that we developed that is, this conditioning, this world we live in. So this practice of letting go of our ego and being grateful for generosity and recognizing our shared humanity. It's such a sad story, but it's played out so often to, let go of this idea of who we think we are and who we're supposed to be, and instead recognize our shared humanity and this interconnectedness. We have to allow ourselves to be soft. We have to allow ourselves to practice generosity and gratitude. It's so important. It's how we keep an open heart in the midst of this shit show. It's not necessarily going to change what's going on, but it's going to change our relationship to it so that we can show up in a better way. We can show up in a healthier way. We also take care of ourselves more. We learn how to take care of ourselves and step back from the crap that we're ingesting. And so, I offer this teaching because gratitude and generosity are available to each of us. As I said, I end the meditation sessions with an invitation to be grateful because it is so important. It softens our hearts. And being generous works on our attachments. They work together. And it's important that we do this work. We can still work to change broken systems and fight injustice. Absolutely, we have to do that. But we don't have to wait for things to be the way we want them to be before we soften our hearts, before we find gratitude, and before we give a little something to someone else. So I hope these words have landed in some way that they may be of benefit to you. And I thank you so much for your kind attention.